I'm Rolando.
I'm Elizabeth.
I'm Paige.
In this video, we're going to be talking about Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker was an author, athlete, and a lot of other things. He was born November 8th, 1847 in Dublin, Ireland. Two books he wrote was Dracula and Primrose Path in 1875. In college, he was an athlete. He did rugby, he was into weightlifting, and he did a lot of things, which was surprising because during his childhood, he was sick the majority of the time. Unfortunately, he died April 20th, 1912, due to stroke or syphilis. Researchers are not really too sure quite yet. Bram's childhood, it was very tough. I kind of feel bad for him because during the whole time, he was either by the window or kind of laying in bed, listening to stories by his mother. How do you guys think it played a role in Dracula?
It's where he got his start. Those stories of Irish history and legend and about the war about the cholera epidemic were a big part in his history of fiction.
And then during his childhood too, like his family was pretty big. There was like 7 of them. That's ridiculous.
His brothers being doctors.
The older two, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then his mother was a writer, and then his father did some charity work. Do you think his mother being a writer kind of influenced the way Dracula was made?
Oh, definitely. He started out in his career following in his father's footsteps, but he ended up in his mother's footsteps after about 10 years.
I wonder if it's because he kind of spent much more time with his mother, because when I was doing research, it didn't really say during his childhood he did much of his father.
No, he was definitely more with his mother. She was taking care of him when he was sick and entertaining him, and yeah.
His adulthood, it definitely took a very interesting turn. He started college in 1864 at Trinity University in Dublin. He studied mathematics, English, and a lot of other things. Do you guys think him going to college kind of helped influence Dracula?
I really do. I think that it gave him more was able to experience more. But I also think it's weird because he studied mathematics instead of anything that has to do with English, and he was fairly good at it because he graduated with honors in 1870.
Yeah, and it's just, I find it very shocking because it's not like in his childhood his mother was teaching him the basics of math, because he didn't start school until age 7.
Yeah,
reading.
He missed a lot of the fundamentals in those first 7 years. He was a very smart person.
Do you think that kind of carried over to some of the characters in Dracula?
It did. Van Helsing especially, because he had so many different jobs, all of them being professional and educated men's jobs. All of his characters were fairly educated, but Van Helsing especially.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of jobs, when he met Irving, I thought that was pretty interesting. How do you think him meeting Irving kind of influenced the way Dracula was created?
Well, Irving, being a pretty famous actor, was very much like Dracula. Dracula was kind of created in his image. He was enchanting and important and well-known, both Henry Irving and Dracula.
Very true. And the way they met, I thought was very interesting, because Bram kind of got this letter from Irving, and then they made the connection that way. And then in Dracula, Dracula sent Jonathan a message, and then they kind of met up. The whole sequence just seems very similar.
I definitely think it portrays onto his real life over. Also with Bram meeting Irving in real life, it helped his career a lot, in a good way.
It gave him a lot of insight, that's for sure, because he was a writer for 30 years, right?
He worked at the Lyceum Theater with Irving up until he died, and he was a writer unpaid at night.
And in the book, Dracula, they talked a lot about like the newspapers, the printing press, all those good things. It's almost as if the things he did in his life carried over into Dracula.
Newspaper was a very realistic thing. It was a very important part of people's lives in the past, and having that in his book made it seem very realistic.
Oh, for sure. I agree 100%.
He also had quite a bit of emphasis on writing and how all of the characters in Dracula wrote everything down that happened to them and recorded their lives. It was important to him to have written records.
I really never saw it like that. That's very interesting. To me, like, that just kind of blew over my mind because, like, it just seemed very normal for people to kind of write about their lives. But I didn't realize how intense he kind of amplified it in Dracula.
Yeah, it definitely was pretty intense.
Why do you think it took so long for Dracula to become famous? Because it was not until he died it really started picking up traction.
Good question. Because it was definitely a long time after he died. A good amount of time.
After he died, his death probably brought it into perspective. People started looking more closely at him because they could inspect his work and his life without him knowing that they were judging him, I guess.
That makes sense. And also, too, when you die, all of a sudden, all these fans usually come out of nowhere. We usually see that, like, with celebrities and rappers, too.
Yeah.
It's incredible. In the book, too, it was very long, and it took him a long time to gather the research. I do wonder if he kind of pushed that hard work onto his characters when they were trying to find Dracula.
Definitely plausible. They had spent quite a lot of time researching Dracula and preparing to capture him. So that probably translated from the amount of time he took researching Dracula.
His brothers being doctors too, I was definitely wondering in the back of my mind if that played a role in Dracula being created.
It definitely had an impact on Dr. Seward and Van Helsing, both being doctors. They had knowledge of medical practices and medicine, and he got most of that information from his two brothers.
Wow, it's almost as if like he had everything he really needed to write the book. The brothers, like, growing up in Ireland, wow. This was the end of the video, and we talked about the adulthood, childhood, and we tried to connect it to Dracula. We did have one other person that could not join us. It was Alex. It's because he is not on the campus this semester, but he did definitely do some work that helped us be able to have this discussion. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll probably catch you in our next one. It feels as if we covered everything. We're at 8 minutes.
We didn't cover his brothers being like doctors as tying into it.
That's I don't know how we skipped that part.
Did we also introduce Irving? I don't remember.
I brought up that he was an actor and that stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, his doctor, we can definitely bring that up. Yeah, so I'll definitely cut out this gap where we talk.